All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the HBP 2021 exhibition round. Today, we will be debating under the motion, this House regret the rising trend of corporations, capitalizing messages of social movements as a means of promotion. So without further ado, to open the debate, I will call the Prime Minister. Time is yours.
Okay, hello. Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Yeah, good. Gender preferred pronoun they or them. POI preference through chat. Please don't disturb me with unmuting yourself because I am easily distracted. So please don't do that. Yeah, without further ado, I will just start my speech, starting it in 3, 2, 1. Black Lives Matter, Me Too movement, those trend rises. It increases the awareness of the society. As the movement becomes popular, the company jumps into the bandwagon that uses the message of that movement in that sense to create certain products, for example, right? We believe that it formulates into two problems. Number one, the fact that corporate are jumping into the trend, meaning that the trend is already big and popular. So to preempt opposition, saying that this will give the trend exposure, it will not, because the trend has gotten its exposure to begin with. But number two, I think the rights of speaking up of this discriminated society or this marginalized community are being jeopardized and taken over by those corporations with no any move or interest to contribute to the movement in a certain sense. The keywords of this debate is the idea that they are capitalizing the messages. How does it mechanize to you? Twofold. Number one, it means that the profit will still go not to the social movement, but instead it goes to the corporation, right? Because this is not a charity. This is not like some type of like giveaway type of support coming from the corporation, but exactly they use this rising trend as a capitalization to make profit. So opposition cannot argue that the money could be mechanized and given to the social movement in that certain sense. But number two, I think the messages when it becomes a trend, then this corporation have the interest to make these messages constantly existing, right, and constantly sustainable. This is never within the ideal of campaign, because when it comes to campaign and when it comes to social movement, yes, we want our messages to be popular, but we want our messages to also end as fast as possible. Because when we're talking about Black Lives Matter of Me Too movement, it's a shame that Black Lives Matter still exists till these years. It means that for many years, Black life issues has never been fixed in that certain sense, right? So that is exactly why commercializing it and making this type of stuff sustain becomes very harmful in that certain sense. We regret. Two framings before I enter my substantive. Number one, this is a regret motion, meaning that you need to evaluate what actually this corporation has done. You cannot say, then you cannot create or made up any type of proposal that you want to analyze in the opposition bench, meaning that if the corporation are not actually helping the movement in the status quo, then it is a fact you cannot run any type of possible scenarios in your side. But number two, I think you need to also understand that no matter how in the end of the day the benefit will exist in the future, principle will matter the most in this type of analysis. Because what we need to understand is that the principle of social movement and what type of movement that this social movement is advocating in that certain sense, right? So in the end of the day, any practical benefit is not generalizable. It's maybe it could happen in one or two scenarios, but please don't buy it over principle. Because in my speech, I have 2 points of principle argument. Number one is in terms of history on what makes a social movement exist at the very first place. Well, surprise, it caused by capitalism. You need to understand that slavery was exactly caused by the economic ambition of white people to enslave black people to increase their what is it to increase their economy, for instance, right? Or feminists exist exactly because women are not given the right to have property, or any type of minority movement exists exactly because the majority wants to take over the entire authority, enabling this minority to sustain, right? So in the end of the day, the corporation is the one who are actually the corporation and this entire capitalistic society is the one that is actually contributes to the existence of social movement and the suffering of minority in that sense, right? Because their greediness of having a business power and their interest to stay powerful is the one that causes the suffering. Now, it comes at the cost of the suffering of this marginalized community. It validates the discrimination if we are enabling them to commercialize our messages. Why so? Because even our suffering in the current status quo, even our attempt to escape from the suffering are being monetized by this corporation, right? And in the end of the day, exactly because we are allowing this corporation to monetize us, the likelihood of us to be able to like be mad at capitalism or like protest or like criticize the government or the corporation becomes really less likely happening in our side of the house. Now, in the end of the day, you need to also understand the past precedences and what messages that are actually being, that are being commercialized by the corporation, right? Number one, it's only a normal messages that is popular, like BLM and Me Too movement, in a way that it's already a powerful campaign, and yeah, it's already too generic. So in the end of the day, we don't really need the support coming from the corporation in that certain sense. And yeah, it's actually the corporation who jumps into our bandwagon. But number two, I think if the corporation's interest is really to help, then they also need to support certain radical movement that we make, right? Because for a certain sense, Black Lives Matter is only the proxy of the movement like abolishing police and whatnot. But this type of corporation like Adidas, do they want to do this? They don't. Exactly. Because in the end of the day, it proves to you that by past precedences, the only interest of this corporation is to gain profit. They did not contribute anything, even in a certain slight exposure. It doesn't exist in that certain sense. It means that company is a big hypocrite. Don't let them commercialize our value. But second argument then, talking about campaign, I think I already hint this argument in my setup, right? It talk about how in the end of the day, when you are normalizing a trend or commercializing a trend, it means that the interest of this corporation is to make this trend go on in that certain senses. What does it mean? It means that they want BLM to exist for years. They not only BLM to still exist for years, but they want BLM to sustain and become constantly popular every year. Pride Month become popular every year. It means what? It means that they're actually supporting the constant suffering of this minority that are constantly being celebrated every year, knowing that, yeah, it means the issue does not end, right? So in the end of the day, it's never a contribution towards the solvement of the issue. It's actually a contribution to the prolonging of the issue. We don't want that, because ideally, even if campaign needs a lot of followers, understand that we want campaign to end as fast as possible. Don't ever buy any commercialization coming from this particular government. We regret that. There are two harms that are being generated by this action. Number one is disable our movement to create to move to another advocacies, because they are keeping this agenda on the top of the notes. For example, they're keeping this agenda becomes the most popular one, like Adidas with queer and gay marriage. Meanwhile, we are currently advocating about gay discrimination in a certain sense, right? But people doesn't listen to us because these big corporations are constantly promoting about those one popular value only. But in the end of the day, exactly, it creates a fake sense of justice, and it commercializes something that is not necessary to be to be advocated. We're proud to open it.
All right, thank Prime Minister for that fine speech. Now to open the case of the opening opposition, I call you upon Leader of Opposition. Here.
Check, am I audible?
Yes, you're audible.
I'm so sorry, but I don't think I'll be able to turn on my camera because it's a bit laggy in my place. Is it fine?
Yep, totally fine.
Okay, so I'm gonna start my speech in 3, 2, 1. Panels, one clarification before moving on towards my whole argument and setups, right? Panels, notice Prime Minister tried to frame this debate saying that, oh, the trend is already popular. That is why then we don't need this kind of capitalization to begin with, right? Panels, I think you need to notice the status quo, right? Like how the discrimination and problems towards minorities still exist in a very huge spectrum, right? We see that tons of people are still suffering because of this, like because a lot of people still don't have the enough awareness and so on and so forth. So I don't think that it is true that, okay, that it is already a very good world that we don't need this kind of help from the companies in and of itself, right? But I think the fact is that this kind of movement is only popular among a spectrum of society, right? Like how younger part of society are more progressive and more accepting towards this kind of movement. So we say that there are still spectrum of society, like how the older people and and other spectrum of society that are still not being touched by the campaign and of itself. This is why we need this kind of corporations as a way to topple down their preconceived notion. This is how, and we're going to change them in the end of the day. I'm going to elaborate on this later on my argument, right? But then just one piece of framing. Thomas noticed that social movements are always remembered by object and symbol, right? It looks like how then certain social, for example, a social movement can be remembered by someone who is like the leader of the group, who can be seen as an object and so on and so forth, right? So we see there is no difference between this and the commercialization that we're trying to propose under our side of the house. So we see that it is still going to be, it's still going to be okay because it has been done for a very long time by the social movement in of itself. But even better, we're able to generate profit by this kind of commercialization to begin with, right? Now, towards my argument, two things. Firstly, I'm going to explain about why is a better alternative than the status quo. But secondly, I'm also going to engage on how it will create a sense of optimism towards the minority at the end of the day, right? Moving on towards the first argument, panels notice the urgency, right? A lot of people actually have certain kind of brand attachment to a brand that can be utilized to the campaign, right? Campaigns like movies or song would be reachable towards the conservative. They tend to be denied because they have a patriarchal resistance that makes, and like this kind of resistance to minority that makes them unable to even understand about this kind of change or this kind of oppression happening towards minority, right? The characterization of the status quo is that people actually rely on trend, right? They pay attention on it, and when something is not trending, they will not even remember about it. In the modern world, that is why we need a commercialization in order to sustain, in order to create a progress instead of social movement in the end of the day. You also need to notice that percentage of the profit will be given to help the movement related NGOs. Money is totally important in this case because we need to create progress as social movement, right? Like how when you want to campaign for something, of course you need money. When you want to lobby the government, of course you need a certain amount of money to actually be able to lobby the government, right? But even further, we are actually able to generate more discussion among the people because people in the status quo are consumers. They would discuss or in a sense try to look into the product more, which is good for us because they would at least be aware about our campaign, right? But for example, a certain product include feminism and like feminist messages inside the campaign. This is where people will become will question, right? Oh, what is this new campaign proposed by the product? This is where they will have even more discussion. This is where they will try to understand about the issue. Where, for example, as simple as browsing and so on and so forth, right? So we say that even if they don't look like so even if they're patriarchal and so on and so forth, they will still be affected because of sense of curiosity that people have since the very beginning of the day. Especially when it becomes so trending, it generates even more incentive for people to deep even further about the issue. But even if they don't look into that much or deep, at least our agenda is already being fulfilled, right? Like how then we'll like the issue is already being seen by more people, or even like by them as simple as buying the product, we're already getting an amount of profit that is why it's still going to be beneficial on our side of the house, right? But then let's talk about the worst case, right? What happens if capitalization is done by a conservative company? At least then there's a new norm, right? That company cannot be anti towards minorities, right? Because if they're not consistent, they can easily backlash. Another scenario is if the consumers only buy the product because of the trend. Yeah, it's still okay because the contribution of the money is already enough to support the campaign, right? At least we're still getting the money. But because going back for the continuity of our whole agenda as a minority, it is important to know that how every cent counts for our campaign. What is the comparative under government side of the rising trend? Three things. Firstly, if you want to rely on genuine activism, it is totally difficult, right? Especially when talking about third world country without the massive amount of promotion, the awareness will not be there. There more likely to be no acceptance or even sense of denial from the society still exists. Secondly, asking for policy change to the parliament is also very hard to be done, right? Due to them having no leverage or the issue is not that popular yet. So there won't be any sense of urgency to the parliament members, especially in developing countries with the weak progress of social movement. This is where then it will be unlikely for government or parliament to hear about our concern, right? But then thirdly, at least with the commercialization of feminists, because purchases feminists and any other kind of social movement, purchases are an inevitable lifestyle of an individual. We can actually capitalize the situation to infuse the aspiration of the social movement behind the products or services that they purchase. But then let's just preempt if then government side want to say that, oh, it will only embolden even more hypocrisy, right? Okay, like let's just bite the bullet. Even if it happens, right, at the bare minimum we still get a minimum of discussion, like how people will still get even more aware, and by them simply buying the product, we're still going to be able to get money and generate some profit that will be useful for our movement. But then moving on to second argument, let's talk about the sense of optimism. But before that, I will take POI from closing up. Once, going twice, going three times. Okay, let's talk about sense of optimism, right? Panels notice the status quo, like how minorities are very stuck in a very toxic situation, right? Like how then victim of rape, for example, they feel like everyone are against them, how minority are constantly discriminated, they don't even think anyone support them to begin with, right? But then the moment companies start to like start to capitalize the message of the social movement, this is where they feel, oh, certain amount of people still care about us, right? By as simple as seeing the advertisement on the street that, for example, Aqua is supporting women, for example, they will feel more empowered, right? Even further, when people try to buy the product, when it's become trending in social media, for example, right? This is where they feel that, oh, a lot of people still care about us, and not all people in the world are that evil towards us, right? This is where it becomes important, because when they feel that people are supporting them and they're not alone, this is where optimism can exist. Optimism is extremely important for a social movement, right? Because the prerequisite of having any kind of improvement is when people are still optimistic about it. What is the comparative, right? Under status quo, these kind of people who live in a very toxic household, in toxic environment, they feel that they're alone. They feel that no one actually support them. This is where they feel pessimistic, right? They feel that, oh, I'm actually meant to be discriminated. I'm meant to be harmed by this kind of majority, for example. This is where there will not be any kind of incentive for them to promote the issue, or as simple as joining social movement, right? Because they feel that they already deserve all discrimination that is happening. It is inherently evil, right? Because the prerequisite of having any kind of change is when people are optimistic, when people want to join the movement, and when they're aware that they are facing a certain unfairness. So then this idea is extremely important, panel. Notice, because like the goal of the social movement in and of itself is they want to empower people. They want more people who are, especially the ones who are suffering, to be able to connect with the issue and find people who have similarities with them. This is where they will be able to gain any kind of change, like how they will propose for any kind of changes in the government, for example, or even like getting more aware from the society. That is why we proudly oppose this motion. Thank you.
All right, I thank Leader of Opposition for that fine speech. Now to continue the case of opening government, I call you upon Deputy Prime Minister. Time is yours.
Am I audible?
Yes, you're audible.
All right. If you want to have any POI, just unmute yourself. Because I cannot see the. Sorry. Kebalik, coy. Do it through the chat. Jangan unmute yourself because it will be very distracting for me. All right. Starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. I can mention literally every single social movement that exists in this world is not because of 7-minute time limit as to why the root cause of their emergence is because of the capitalistic structure that alienate the marginalized people that we want to protect since the very beginning. That is the purpose of social movement in of itself, right? Therefore, the ultimate goal then is to actually tackle that precise thing, right? With that said, I think when it comes to messaging of what we actually want as a social movement, the most important thing is to be very clear and not wishy-washy, because we are facing major scrutiny and spotlight by the population as an emerging, like the oppositional movement, right? We have limited fund and time because our constituents died on the ground every day. So therefore, oppositions need to explain, in which they all have very terrible job in explaining this, and comparative as to why incorporating our enemy can still make our message crystal clear of who we actually want to face and who we actually want to defeat, right? We still have room to actually criticize our enemy while also befriending them at the same time without being called a hypocrite and wishy-washy, right? I think they all need to actually do a very good job in explaining this. I think PM has been very clear in comparative on this. I'm going to like expand the room much more further, right? I think that the whole, but also on framing of opening opposition is that their whole idea is talking about on how we want to create awareness, right? I think regardless of the utility of the awareness, right? We consider it's going to happen in our awareness that's going to happen is at the house at best. But if we can prove to you that awareness is useless if the message and your purpose is not clear, so therefore the idea of having very clear message is at higher priority than having awareness of your social movement. That means opening oppositions is lower than opening governments, right? But this is also a quick clarification, because their whole benefit is talking about on how we can actually create much more money, right? I think this is not something that is actually going to happen. I think they are very dismissive to opening governments clears that up regarding on how like this is different from charities, right? Because when actually like corporations capitalizing message of social movement as a means of promotion, that means they're just using our message. They're going to they're going to like borrow our message as a way for them to actually reach higher people, right? That means that the only opposition that can the only benefit that oppositions can fairly propose is the idea of like awareness of your message, the reach of your message, but not necessarily money that comes directly when they actually buy certain product that actually use that kind of message, right? Because this looks like, for example, like pink washing, for example, when actually like a lot of like companies actually use and incorporate like LGBT friendly messages, for example, in their shirt, for example, but not a sense of their money that comes with purchasing that kind of share actually goes into LGBT community in of itself. The pure intentions of those kind of like pinkwashing is just to create a virtue signaling of those corporations that we are actually a friend of LGBT movement, but they are actually not at all. When they're actually a lot of like their LGBT and queer workers, for example, are being discriminated inside of the work, inside of the offices of those companies and of itself. I'm going to explain the urgency of that case. Before that, any POI coming from C or O? Going once, going twice. Sure. So let's talk about the harms, right? I think the first principle that is very harmful, regardless of the practicalities that going to manifest in opening a portion, is that your idea of incorporating capitalism in your social movement is that it betrays your constituent. I think PM has already told you on how the root cause of movement, the root cause of social movement, and why discrimination and suffering toward our constituent exists since the very beginning of the existence of social movement is because of the capitalism. For example, feminist movement, right? Especially the first wave emergence is because the disparities of property ownership that in capitalistic characterization is that only men can have housing, for example, only men can have property ownership and women should not have property ownership at all, right? That's exactly why, for example, first wave feminism actually emerged in the very first place, right? And the idea of LGBT community also being discriminated simply because of the capitalistic structure that you need to have like generations and baby birth, for example, to actually have to actually maintain your family business, for example, and whatnot, right? That means the grievances that exist within our constituent is actually toward the capitalism that has betrayed them and alienated them. And the job of social movement then rootedly is to create platform to express the differences in the first place, in which you cannot really use it when you incorporate yourself into capitalistic structure, i.e. by allowing capitalism to actually capitalize on your messages. That means what happened is that social movement have no utility of their existence anymore in their certain house because they betray their whole existence, their whole purpose of existence of itself, right? But also this is also incorporating engagement toward LO, because that means LO argument on the solidarity and loneliness that these these discriminated people are going to experience in outside the house will not going to manifest that, right? Because of what used to be the purpose of social movement is actually reach them, actually make them feel not alone, will not going to happen when the savior is actually befriending the main enemy as to why they're actually becoming discriminated in the very first place, right? I think DLO need to actually answer this very burden to actually establish their argument. Second, like benefit that's going to happen in manifested in outside the house is the flexibility of your message. What does that mean? I think social movement, the purpose of you is actually to actually react. It's a form of reactionary movement, right? That is to say, when there is a direct harm that is inflicted towards your constituent, you need to adapt your messages to actually react to as to why, how to actually solve that kind of like harm, right? In dire time, there are need for you to actually use radical messages. What does that mean? For example, in BLM context, right? There used to be no emergence on defund the police because we used to actually trust the reformation of the police, but the fact that actually police institutions does not actually reform at all. That is why in dire times we need to actually use radical message to defund the police and actually not use police at all, right? This is a very radical messages that actually is very urgent in reacting toward the police brutality that is much more increasing in current times, right? But what's going to happen is that when you actually incorporate in capitalism's friendly commercialization messages, is that you're going to need to be commercially friendly. That means that the idea of radical message is inherently not radical, is inherently not commercial friendly. That means it's less likely for you to actually incorporate those kind of like messages, for example. That means you lose that kind of awareness, for example, and there's less likely for this kind of like capitalist for less likely for this social movement to actually use this kind of radical messages because they don't want to actually lose their platform of awareness if what is actually the benefit of LO want to achieve, right? That means you're going to very inflexible in terms of what you actually want to create of messages is. Thirdly is the flexibility of your campaign. I think the root cause of I think we already proved to you on how the root cause of capitalism is to actually criticize the corporation in of itself, in which you cannot do that when you're actually befriending them, right? For example, like in Dove in of itself, that actually use feminist movement messages in the sort of like beauty standard and whatnot. They actually also create a huge wage gap inside of the companies between women and men, right? But that means you cannot actually criticize publicly this kind of like those companies because without being called hypocrite, for example, because you actually profitize off these companies in of itself, right? That means you also become very inflexible to actually criticize any kind of corporation that you want to actually profitize out of it. I think this is going to betray your constituents also. That means your whole purpose of social movement will be going to crumble down. There's no urgency as to why social movement need to happen in the first place. Very proud to.
All right, I thank Deputy Prime Minister for that fine speech. Now to continue the case of opening opposition, I call upon Deputy Leader of Opposition. Time is yours.
Hi, am I audible? Check, am I audible?
Can you speak again? You're a bit choppy.
Check, am I audible? Check, check.
Yeah, it's clear now.
Okay. Okay. If you want a POI, you can just unmute yourself. I'll most likely prioritize closing. That being said, starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. How do we expect change to happen in the world if we condemn the groups and companies that speak out about it? How would you generate change when we live and breathe under a capitalistic structure? We cannot escape capitalism wherever we go. Not exactly sure to what extent do you want to separate these movements from such capitalistic structure, right? If a company has the clout and resources to enact social change, then it should be able to do so while also obtaining positive business results as well. It's important to understand that support doesn't always have to be selfless. It doesn't always have to be charity. It doesn't always have to be a one-way relationship that does not harm you to any extent and does not cost you anything. Two extraneous rebuttals before moving on to my speech, right? Firstly, I don't think the fact that companies are commercializing and profiting and selling merchandise of Black Lives Matter is the reason why that movement still exists today and the problem still exists today. This is a very shallow analysis coming from PM, right? If you want something to blame for this lack of progress, blame the white supremacist government and politicians that hinder that progress. Blame the abundant amount of racist people that still very much exist against Black people that are the cause of continued cases of police brutality and everyday discrimination. They brought this problem to you, never proved why without commercialization or even why without it, all that I've just mentioned to you will be solved under their side. A big prerequisite of the reason behind the lack of progress that they tell us is linked to policy making, right? Unfulfilled burden, the correlation between that to the capitalistic structure. But secondly, slavery and how these corporations are controlling us and monetizing us from the types of products and contents that we use. Okay, let's make something clear, right? Slavery is discrimination without consent whatsoever. Realize, Judge, in the end, the consumers have the power. The market controls the companies, not the other way around, right? We have a responsibility to make sure it develops for the greater good of all, not just for the company. When it comes to the capitalization of social issues, companies can positively impact the public while at the same time benefiting the organization. They're not always this evil Disney villain, right? This is also why it's so understandable why companies cannot support your radical causes, because they have a business to run. The important point we're trying to make sure is that these companies are legitimate and actually enacting the social change or action. You have the ability to decide what company you give your money to. May you base every purchase on the deeper root of the company's ethical values or not. Your choice. Don't dare compare this to slavery, right? This is why our principle still stands, because one of them is if a company has the clout and resources to enact social change, then it should be able to do so while also obtaining the positive business results as well. That being said, I'm going to move to my arguments. Firstly, I'm going to talk about the perspective of the movement and what's strategic and what's not, comparing both sides. Here's a prerequisite you need to understand. Mind you, one that has not been charitably considered by OG. We think it's important to adjust to the current world and the current society and how it works. This means that people thrive on trends. People thrive and look at important famous issues and controversial products. This is how you generate attention. This is the type of exclusiveness that we have on our side under commercialization. Because everything today, and I mean everything is commercialized, everything needs to be marketed to the max, because many different issues are all trying to fight for relevancy and support. Sure, the type of awareness you get under OG is people realizing the feminist movement still exists and people knowing that the feminist movement is still opening up their doors for more people to donate, stuff like that. But it's not going to be people actually trying to take their money out of their pocket and do that because they have their interest somewhere else, because a brand or a big company is able to market a certain cause that is more desirable for them in comparison to actually donating to the feminist movement. If the debate becomes whether awareness is needed or no, or whether the type of awareness that we get from this type of march is actually necessary,
We say fine, even if at their best the type of awareness we get is the same or symmetrical, we think what we are after here is the additional incentives and benefits under this pragmatic. In that one, typically there's 3 different scenarios that apply here, right? Firstly, usually there's an existing prerequisite that companies, when they are collaborating or making certain products that attach to a cause like LGBTQ or feminist, or for example, they would market it and run that by giving a portion of their profit to the cause. The example of this is Gillette, the best man can be, Coca-Cola supporting world hunger. Danesh explained to you in regards to the positive impact of this. Mind you, again, this is something that very much exists today. After this debate ends, go ahead, open Twitter, open Instagram, open Google, open social media, look at the forms of corporations using these messages for their products. This type of collaboration exists. It is common. We don't get why from the beginning they ban opposition bench from arguing this, but we're going to bite the bullet anyway. But 2, we think this is strategic access for the movement as well. Why? Because the Me Too movement, for example, entered the mainstream consciousness, and that increased awareness precisely because it drew corporations which recognize an untapped market with high potential for profit towards movement. This means that commercialization actually removed barriers to entry associated with joining the movement, so that the supporters of Me Too began demonstrating their association by buying merchandise. And when other corporations are commercializing your cause, you have the power to do it yourself, and you have the power of the public to counterbalance that. What's the proof of this? Adidas Rainbow, right, got backlash. Cancel culture and social media is powerful enough today, meaning that these movements are not living in the Stone Ages. We have capital to defend ourselves should it come to severe misinterpretation or severe overshadowing. We think social movements can employ commercialization to break stereotypes. Like, for example, how the feminist movement can insert their message into brands and products that are not stereotypically feminine. This helps even when they don't get a single dime in return, for example. But let's bite the bullet anyway, right? This overshadowing issue they tell us, the whole thing about is actually distracting from the movement and creating this false sense of security. First of all, we think minorities are aware, and if they're not exactly safe or secure, if they are still receiving discrimination from their community, they're not just going to blindly follow Adidas and Gillette and feel that they're safe the moment that they come out with products. 2, we think positive and negative discourse and overshadowing is always going to happen. Like, for example, how you cannot have just a positive discourse and positive contribution towards a movement. We think the whole point of controversy and the whole point of trends is to get those two to always exist in the social media and always have people creating that heated discourse that keeps it relevant. That being said, the only place you can generate this progress is by engaging within the capitalistic structure, because newsflash everyone, we live and breathe in it, right? We can't escape it. Until their last second, not sure to what extent they want these movements to do. To what extent do you want to separate yourself from the capitalistic structure, and how do you see that working for you? We see from their speech that they kept explaining to us about how evil the capitalistic structure is and how it's actually overshadowing our movement, how it hampers us from usual progress. But then we don't exactly get, how are you going to market your movement? How are you going to reach more people, especially in third world countries or in conservative areas like my LO has already told you, if you actually don't insert yourself into this capitalist structure? With the whole point, for example, why feminist movement, why all these movements have been doing this, why they're even when companies are interpreting them and when companies are taking the spotlight away from them, they let that happen anyway, is because they already realize that they actually get benefits through this way, because they actually get people talking, and when you get people talking, it can actually lead to much better discourse that gives you better capital, like how we explained. Proud to oppose.
Okay. Am I audible?
Yes, you
Yeah.
are.
Okay. All right. I thank Deputy Leader of Opposition for that fine speech. Now to open the closing bench, I call upon Member of Government. Time is yours.
Am I audible?
Yes, you're audible.
My preference POI just chat on the chat box. I'm going to start my speech in 3, 2, 1, go. Several response toward one opposition's bench debate. First, but they believe that if these corporations are accompanied with that social movement, they believe that as a social movement, they can get money from that company to help community achieving their goals as a social movement. In these cases, to doing campaign, campaign, and so on and so forth. First, the problem is that they never explain to you why the campaign from this social movement that get endorsing from company will be accepting from that society, and why the effectivity of this value from the social movement to the society will be better rather than this social movement doing campaign independently. Because we believe that as a social movement, they are expected to be independent. Why? Because they are the only the only body that can giving the balance counter and balances toward the several stakeholders that involves toward the issues that they are want to achieve. Cooperating with the companies, meaning that there are process of how you excluding your value, or you are excluding them as a market or as a goals to like campaigning your value, meaning that it's hard for you to like bring criticism toward this company itself, depending toward this corporation itself to funding our move, meaning that there are process of how we are depend on them. So that's the process of how your power as a community to critics and or also to increasing the issues and the problem that exist in our society. It will be less, and you will lose your own power. So why it's important for you to like having the independent body, to being independent and not rely toward this community, this company itself, because we believe company also as a source of problem that exists, that as a cause of why social problem that exists, for example, slavery, discriminations, and many other problems, and so on and so on and so on and so forth. Second, responses, when they are trying to say the reasons why they want to using or capitalizing the message of social movement as the reasons of how they can showing up the feel of optimism of this social movement, because social movement will say that they feel that there are still people in line to supporting them, and so on and so forth. First, I don't think that it's explosive argumentations, and it's also untrue. Because why? Because the existence of this corporation to using your message only to capitalizing it, there are no intention from them to like keep in touch with your own value, helping you at very first place, and so on and so forth. Because if those corporations having the intentions to keep in touch with your value, their first step is to keep in touch with you, knowing your values, and so on and so forth, not directly using the value of the social movement with their products to like promoting their products, and so on and so forth. Let's moving to pana substantive. First, justifications why it's why to capitalizing the value of a social movement is regrettable. First layer, because we believe that a social movement will be used as a black horse of corporations itself. As I said before, the first step that you have to use if you want to supporting that community is you have to keep in touch, communicate with them, tell what actually the problems, and know what the grassroots or the roots problem that exists on that community, and so on and so forth. Secondly, we believe that in the current status quo, the corporations that exist is they are having no interest to like supporting that community, meaning that their intentions to using your value only to capitalizing it. And I don't think so it's morally justifiable, because this social social movement, it's the vulnerable actor that we have to like supporting them fully, not only to capitalize them. Second layer, we believe that at the end, the discourse of your society will be worse. Why? Because we believe that opposition also never explains you why corporations have also obligation to sharing or increasing the value of social movement itself. Because the most important thing that company have to do is to internalize it, that value. Like for example, in the process of recruitment to serving or to like to serving what should they do for their workers and so on and so forth. Secondary reasons why this capitalizations of social movement value are problematic. In the point of stakeholder, first about as company, it's not the strategic promotions, because we believe that the value of social movement is still less accepted from society. It will be worse because your discussions is not upon the how the quality of your products. It because at the end there are process of cancellating toward your product because our society not common with that and so on and so forth. So your discourse about your product is not good at all. Second, as a movement itself, I think it's not good as movement to like capitalize their value, because you will get more cancellations and you will lose trust for our society, because our society expected you to be independent in order to you not you are not get overshadowed from that company and so on and so forth. Proud to proposing.
All right, I thank member of government for that fine speech. Now to open the case of closing opposition, I call you upon member of opposition. Time is yours.
Am I audible?
Yes, you are audible.
I'll start my speech in 3, 2, 1. Firstly, let's see how in the status quo, the way corporations capitalize these kind of messages in their product. We think that they first do a review and research upon what is the idea of our movement, because government cannot say that these corporations did not do research because of 3 reasons. One, they had an expert social research like human resource and development. They have expert researchers that they hire, so that is how they basically keeping up with the trend, right? Secondly, we think that they don't want to take the risk of receiving backlashes from our movement, so that they will be considerate, right? 3, they also give certain amount of money to the movement. For example, like in celebrating Pride Month, brand usually release a special edition merch for Pride Month, right? So in the end of the day, they give us a certain amount of donation to our movement, right? Okay, this have been brought by opening opposition, but opening opposition did not explain to you what incentivized this company to give us donation. The thing that incentivizes our company to give us donation is because when they attach on their product like, hey, we are going to donate to certain group, it will increase their amount of sales, right? So it is unfair for opening government to say that, hey, we cannot mechanize to give a certain amount of donations. No, we can mechanize to give our movement certain amount of donations because it is already exist in the status quo, right? Before moving on to my argument, several responses to the opening government. Firstly, they said that the rights of speaking up for this movement is going to be taken away from the company because you are taking away their profit. We think that no, because the idea of donations exists. Secondly, we think that minorities that is working on that company exist. So this kind of minority that works there can pitch the idea to the company. thirdly, even if they don't have these minorities to work with them, back again to my framing that they have research, they have expert researchers, right? So it will not going to be that misleading, right? They also don't want to get the risk to get called out, right? But even if they represent our ideology in the wrong way, we think that it is still okay because we can still call them out for misleading our idea, because the fact that they use our identity, meaning that our group already provide them a good amount of sales percentage, right? We already have meaning that we already have a power to control them. We can use we can use this as our validation to calling them out. Compared when they did not use our identity, they will invalidate your protest towards their products, right? Because we think that if they are not going to capitalize our identity, their products is going to be even more problematic. For example, when they not sugarcoat, when McD did not sugarcoat their product as eco-friendly, what they are going to do is that they are going to use all plastics to their even more plastics that is environmentally damaging to their products, right? But when they label themselves as eco-friendly, we can now call out McD that, hey, your eco-friendly is not enough. And that is what is happening in the status quo. When you going to McD, they are no longer provide you plastic bag. They now provide you a more eco-friendly alternative. That is also what is happening with Starbucks, etc. Right? But if you still did not want to go with the company, the only way for you to deliver your idea is that now only through demonstration. We think that it is harmful because okay, demonstration maybe benefit our movement, but it harms your members on individual level because you keep pushing them to become frontliner of your movement. You will increase the percentage of them to face police brutality and whatnot, right? Second responses to them, they talking about principle. They saying that it is not just because in terms of history, capitalism is what creates our movement. We think that this principle is no longer relevant because capitalism in the status quo is already become more moderate as what not as what they portray, and not as evil as that what they are saying. Because if they are that evil, they will still, because if capitalism is still that evil, they will still continue to do slavery, right? But in fact, they now starting to give us equal right, shows to you that, hey, they are being as moderate right now. The fact that the one who did slavery, plus the fact that the one who did slavery is a different person with the one who runs the company. So you cannot shift the blame to the current boss and CEOs because they are not the one who did slavery. It is their ancestor, and we should not held their children accountable. Because if you want to say that it is justified to hold their children accountable, you're going to also justify to kill the children of Adolf Hitler. But I don't think that the children of Adolf Hitler is accountable, right? Because they are born innocent. They are not the one who is at fault, right? If they are that evil as what they say, they won't give you their innovations. They won't even let you to touch their products, ladies and gentlemen. We think that this is comparatively worse because when technological company, for example, did not let you to touch their innovation, that is the moment when our movement cannot catch up with the trend. Our movement cannot catch up with the with the requirement to look for a job, for example. That is the moment when our members cannot go to work because they can achieve technology, for example. That is the moment when we loses our opportunity to gain capital for our movement, to sustain our movement. Next is that they said that this message is already popular, so there is no urgency to work with companies. I think that it is untrue. Just because all African American know about Black Lives Matter does not mean that it is already popular enough, because some people do not have the time to read the news. Some people do not have the time to watch the news. Some people have different interests. That is why the only way for us to assert our idea to them is that to attach our message to this kind of products that they cannot escape, to attach our idea to their basic necessities so that they can know our existence. Thank you.
All right. I thank you, member of opposition, for that fine speech. Now, to close the case of the government bench, I call you upon government whip. Time is yours.
Okay, wait. I'll set up my timer first. Okay. Mana ya? Okay. Am I audible?
Yes, you're audible.
All right. Starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. Ladies and gentlemen, my beloved educators, before we jump to the debate, we need to actually know what is social movement itself, ladies and gentlemen. We need to know the essence of social movement and what is the corporation motive using and the social movement, that is social movement in the society, ladies and gentlemen. Firstly, we need to know the essence of social movement. Social movements comes to deliver a valuable message that is important to everyone, to advocate some issues that is problematic to the society. Meanwhile, in the corporations only comes for their own profit without even thinking about what the people need, what is the message, what is the substantial message that will be delivered by the social movement. It's anyway, ladies and gentlemen. Before I jump to my substantial poll, I would like to take some response toward the government side, towards the opposition side of the house. They say that first, social movement community will gain money from the corporation. But ladies and gentlemen, before we think about the corporation itself, ladies and gentlemen, we need to actually know the essence of social movement. By the social movement, by the corporation promoting by using the message of the social movement, it means that people will think the social movement being right, being the corporation writing the social movement, and thus people will not believe the message that delivered by the social movement itself, ladies and gentlemen. Because why? Because people are already aware on how cruel the corporation, the word of the corporation itself, ladies and gentlemen. Because the people, the society know that the corporation only comes for their profit without even thinking about the people itself, without even thinking about the profit for the society itself, ladies and gentlemen. Thus, people will distrust the social movement community, and it is the social movement itself, the essence of social movement, and the agenda of the social movement wouldn't be success, ladies and gentlemen. Second, and about the donation, ladies and gentlemen, there are several ways, other ways to gain money without rely on the corporation, ladies and gentlemen. First, we can get the donation from the society, that is from the society that is agree with our with the social movement community, like in the LGBTQ, people who believe that LGBTQ is a good community, they will donate for the agenda of the social of the LGBTQ, ladies and gentlemen, for the example. And second response, they believe that corporation could support the agenda. They believe that the corporation could support the agenda of the social movement, but they don't think strictly on how it's problematic towards the corporation and also for the social movement itself, ladies and gentlemen. Firstly, I would say why? Because corporation, you know, like for example, in DAF, ladies and gentlemen, if in DAF it is actually, for example, if DAF do the DAF already show us that their product are only for the white people, like their model only for they only show their model as a white people and not for the black people, ladies and gentlemen. That is why it's problematic for the corporation to capitalize the message of the social movement. Why? Because there will be a social gap. Like people will think that, oh, this project is only for people, for this group, and this product is only for this group, and it will bring a problematic, and it will end in the discrimination, for example, in our worst world, that people will think that for example, the DAF, it will only DAF product only for the white people, ladies and gentlemen. And three questions, ladies and gentlemen. Why is it not okay if corporation collaborate with social movement? And second, what will happen if what is the worst way that could happen if the corporation collaborate with social movement? And third, why corporations should do their own business itself, and also for the social movement itself, ladies and gentlemen. Why? First, it is my first speaker already told you that it is immoral for social movement, for corporation to use the method of the social movement, because back to the essence of the social movement exists because of a meaningful value that need to be delivered, ladies and gentlemen. Thus, it is important to keep the purpose of its message. And if the corporation use the message of the social movement, ladies and gentlemen, the people that already aware of the work of the corporation, that people already have a mindset that corporation only comes for their profit, and so on and so forth. Corporation wouldn't think about the society. That it is important because if corporation collaborate with social movement, then will be a distrust by the society to the social movement itself, and then the base of the social movement wouldn't be success, and the agenda wouldn't be successful, ladies and gentlemen. And by the side of the corporation, it is harmful, waste of money, and waste of money, because what? Because why? It is harmful because like if the Gillette using the Me Too movement, and it is harmful because if they don't know what is, because corporation actually don't know what is the agenda of the social movement itself. They only think about the profit, and also it is actually harmful because they might have a blunder. They might use the social the message in wrong way, and also it is not okay because people it is not okay because people wouldn't buy the corporation product, and thus also the people will distrust the social movement itself, ladies and gentlemen, even if the social movement group clarify that it is wrong, because it's already been delivered in the whole social media, ladies and gentlemen. That's all.
All right, I thank Government Whip for that fine speech. Now to close the debate, I call you upon Opposition Whip. Time is yours.
Am I audible?
Yes, you're audible.
Okay. I can't turn on my camera since my internet connections are really bad. Okay, starting my speech in 3. Starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. We believe that the value or the message of social movement are always need to be increased, to be spread to the society, and other things, right? So we think that the moment this social movement need to always gain others entity to provide and to spread their value more, right? Because we think that as social movement, it also less powerful if you can only touch a certain individual, but you cannot internalize your value on their daily life, on the others powerful thing, for example, like the corporation itself, right? So my points of rebuttal for opening government and closing government will be just integrated, right? So the opening government, firstly, talking about we will not have that advantage, because the advantage will just go to the corporation, right? But we say it is not true, right? Like Ayub has already told you what is actually the mechanizations or the system of or charity and whatnot, right? But we say even if it is not happen, we say it is okay, because the profit, even if the profit not directly come from the corporation, we say it's okay, right? Because what we want is the attention and spread our awareness and internalize our value in the daily life, right? So the benefit already exists anyway, not directly coming to corporation, but coming from the society, coming from the support from the society, coming from the awareness, and they realize of our existency of our value itself, right? So, for example, maybe the car that is environmental friendly, we say people, even if maybe for some corporation they will not give us the direct impact, but at least the society will understand that, oh, the environment, there is the chance for us to use another car that is maybe not harming our environment, or maybe others value that we think it is important, right? But also we say this is very strategic for this social movement, because of why? Because there are some values that people do not know anyway. For example, like I has already told you, they don't have the time for it, or maybe they don't have that interest on that way, right? For example, there are specific value that we want to spread for the people to remember. For example, like the day of the Pride Day, or maybe, for example, that like the International Earth Day and whatsoever, right? So this corporation help us to pin out all of the specific and all of the main value that we would like to celebrate, or we would like to give and tell the society, right? And in comparative is that on their side there will be no benefit, there will be no changes. They will stick on this traditional stance that they want to pursue, right? So meanwhile, we say that we need to generous and open in order to more moderate, to spread our awareness itself, right? But also they talking about the social movement will be picky to criticize the corporation. It coming from the OG and closing government, right? But we say no, it's not true, because social movement focus on their identity. They never think to afraid in criticize them in criticizing anyone, right? Because they use this because they want to pursue their value, so they will be more they will really intense to show what kind of value that are misinterpreted, right? Also we say it is still legitimate for us to critique them, because the moment there's some problem happen, moreover it would be better anyway for social movement, because the moment we critique them, it will make double pressure, and for corporation they will be shamed for our critics, because they already use our value to campaign and as a promotion, but they misinterpret that. So it will be very good for us to critique them, and we have the justify reasons to do that, right? But also we say this is why this is not harm, and this is very exclusive in closing opposition, because like the closing government say told you that you need to keep on touch and the grassroots problems and whatsoever. We say it's already happened anyway, right? Because the corporation always research that they need to find the valid reasons, because they afraid to be calling out by the society. They don't want make an intention to get lost, right? But also we say the moment they're talking about the corporation not care about our value, but we say they care, right? Because they afraid to be called out by the society. They afraid to misinterpret and whatsoever, so that they care to our value itself, right? But also, we say the progressivity in the current status quo, for example, like the moment Victoria's Secret, for example, like using the model, then they change the identity of the beauty. It really helped us to spread out like, these kinds of beauty standards are regrettable. We need to change it because there are certain corporations that support these kinds of change, right? So it will spread more the identity of the beauty standard that the feminists don't love to, right? But also we say how about the corporations that they just only pretend to use that, meanwhile they are the one that make this cows, right? But we say it is not true, because it will create a momentum to establish our work, right? To spread more value. It bridge our social movement to internalize our value. For example, like the environment, the corporation, we can internalize that, this kind of things is very good for you, because at least then they will want to do that, because they think that the moment they follow our value, they also get the intention, they will also get profit, like the identity of corporation itself, right? It makes them will always maybe increase their value, the use of our value. For example, like McDonald's, like they always increase the eco-friendly thing, like they have, right? And also we say it will make them feel pressure, because they will afraid to misinterpret it, and they will have the pressure to not backlashing what is actually the thing that they have already done, right? It will very helpful for us, because we will have like the legitimate stance to like call them out if they don't they use our misinterpreting our value. And yeah, so proud to oppose.
All right. I thank opposition whip for that fine speech. So that marks the exhibition debate for today. Regina, maybe you can stop the recording.